In the unforgiving deserts of Arizona Territory, where summer shows no mercy and winter brings bitter cold, a lone Apache warrior named Tahoe cradles his infant daughter against his chest. Once respected for his hunting skills and wisdom in tribal council, he now struggles simply to keep his child alive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The death of his wife during childbirth has transformed Tahoe into a shadow of himself, surviving on what little he can hunt while his baby daughter weakens with each passing day. The year is 1885, and the world shows little kindness to a native man traveling alone with an infant. When Sarah Holloway, a mission schoolteacher with her own painful past, discovers them collapsed near a dried creek bed, she makes a choice that will forever alter all their lives. As she nurses them back to health, something unexpected begins to stir in her heart, a second chance at the maternal love she thought had been denied to her forever. But can two souls from entirely different worlds, both scarred by profound loss, learn to trust and love once more? The mission bell at Fort Apache hadn't changed in 15 years. Sarah Holloway appreciated that consistency as she arranged the days reading primers on each rough-hewn desk, her fingers lingering on the worn pages. Outside her classroom window, Arizona's October painted the world in watercolor reds and golds. The kind of morning that reminded her why she'd chosen this remote outpost to rebuild her life after the devastation back east. "Good morning, Miss Holloway," Emily Thompson's cheerful voice carried across the empty classroom. Always first to arrive, Emily reminded Sarah of herself at that age, eager, bright-eyed, full of questions about everything. Sarah forced herself to smile, though her heart ached at the sight of Emily's small frame, knowing the girl had lost both parents to smallpox the previous winter. "Morning, sweetheart. How about helping me set up the writing slates?" Sarah's voice remained steady, practiced. She'd learned to navigate these moments, these unexpected reminders of what she'd lost. A teaching certificate framed on the wall behind her desk caught the weak morning light. 7 years of experience teaching at mission schools, yet nothing had prepared her for teaching through grief. The rest of her students trickled in as dust swirled outside, each bringing gusts of dry air and childhood chatter. Sarah moved among them with gentle efficiency, helping with buttons and bootlaces, settling minor disputes over pencils and favorite seats. This was her sanctuary now. This classroom with its alphabet charts and simple arithmetic tables, its small bookshelf of donated volumes, promising adventures far from her own thoughts. During morning reading, Sarah's hand unconsciously drifted to her abdomen, a habit she hadn't been able to break in the 3 years since losing her own child. Her engagement hadn't survived that loss. Thomas couldn't understand why she needed to leave Boston, why she'd chosen this frontier outpost when no one knew her story. He'd wanted to marry right away, as if moving forward could simply erase the daughter they'd lost. As if Sarah's body hadn't become a battlefield of grief and medical interventions. The children's voices washed over her as they took turns reading about settlers heading west. Sarah checked the weather outside during their independent work time. Another dust storm approaching from the south. She'd need to stock up on supplies after school, maybe finally repair that leaky roof on her small cabin at the edge of the mission grounds. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Miss Holloway," Tommy raised his hand, his forehead wrinkled with concern. "Is it true that Apache people can walk for days without water?" Sarah welcomed the distraction, launching into a careful explanation of desert survival skills. This was where she felt most herself now, teaching, sharing knowledge, nurturing young minds. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days caring for other people's children, while her own dreams of motherhood lay buried in a Boston cemetery. The afternoon brought geography lessons, and Sarah helped her students trace the expanding territories on faded maps. She praised their work, each careful rendering of mountains and rivers, while her own thoughts drifted to small silver locket, still tucked in her bedside drawer. Her daughter had lived just long enough for Sarah to hold her once, perfect in every way except for the frailty that took her too soon. As the final bell approached, Sarah noticed dust clouds growing thicker now. The local trading post had issued a warning about severe weather conditions for the coming days. She made sure each child was properly prepared before leaving, watching from her classroom door as they joined the stream of students, heading for the missions dormitories or waiting parents. In the quiet of her empty classroom, Sarah gathered her things, checking twice to ensure she had enough supplies at home to weather the coming storm. The forecast mentioned possible supply disruptions, and her little cabin on the outskirts of the mission was particularly vulnerable to nature's fury. She'd learned quickly that Arizona territory demanded respect and preparation. Riding home through the thickening dust, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Maybe it was the storm, or maybe it was just the weight of another year passing. Her third year alone, her third year carrying this hollow space where motherhood should have been. She pulled her scarf tighter around her face and urged her horse forward, reminding herself that she'd chosen this life. This fresh start in a place where the desert's vastness matched her own sense of emptiness. Sarah's horse picked its way carefully along the narrow trail, barely visible through the swirling dust. The storm had intensified faster than predicted, transforming her usual 15-minute ride home into a perilous journey through near-blinding conditions. She'd stayed late at the mission preparing for next week's history lessons, a decision she now regretted. As darkness settled over the Arizona desert, a flash of movement caught her eye. Something dark against the endless red. Sarah reined in her horse, squinting through her dust-covered scarf. There, almost hidden among the rocks, lay what appeared to be a man. A native man, judging by his long hair and clothing, motionless, except for one arm clutching something to his chest. Common sense told her to keep riding. She was only 2 miles from home, and approaching an unknown man alone was dangerous for a woman in these territories. But something about the stillness of his form, interrupted only by that protective arm, spoke of desperation rather than threat. Sarah dismounted, wrestling with her conscience. The man wasn't visible from the main trail. She'd ridden this route hundreds of times and never noticed this particular rock formation. The storm was her only reason for spotting him now, her horses. Nervous detour bringing them this way. She grabbed her canteen and medical kit from her saddlebag. The wind cut through her woolen coat as she approached the fallen figure. Up close, the man looked worse than she'd imagined. His face was gaunt with hunger and thirst, his lips cracked and bleeding. What struck her most was his youth. He couldn't be more than 25, though suffering had carved lines around his eyes that spoke of greater age. Sarah knelt beside him, and the slight movement of her approach caused the man's eyes to flutter open. Dark, intelligent eyes that immediately filled with suspicion and fear. He tried to move away, to shield whatever he held against his chest. But weakness prevented him from doing more than tightening his grip. That's when Sarah heard it, the weakest cry she'd ever heard from a baby. "Oh God," she whispered, maternal instinct overriding caution. She approached slowly, hands raised in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Please, I'm here to help. I have water, medicine. You need to get out of this storm." The man's eyes never left her face, weighing, judging, deciding whether to trust. Sarah uncapped her canteen, took a small sip herself to show it was safe, then offered it to him. After a moment's hesitation, his free hand reached for the water. He drank sparingly, with the discipline of one accustomed to rationing, then most tellingly tilted the canteen toward the bundle in his arms. The blanket shifted, revealing the tiny face of an infant, perhaps 3 or 4 months old. The baby's eyes were closed, her cheeks frighteningly hollow, her breathing shallow. "The baby needs medical attention," Sarah said clearly, pointing to her medical kit, then to the child. "Please let me help you both." Something in her voice must have reached him. His grip on the baby loosened slightly, allowing Sarah to dampen a clean cloth and moisten the infant's parched lips. The man watched her every move, hawk-like despite his weakness. "My name is Sarah Holloway," she said, unsure if he understood English but needing to fill the silence with something other than the howling wind. "I teach at the mission school. My home is close by." She pointed in the direction of her cabin. "Shelter," she added, making a roof shape with her hands. "Tahoe," the man whispered, his voice rough from disuse or thirst. He touched his chest, then gestured to the baby. "Ayanna." "Ayanna," Sarah repeated, smiling at the infant who stirred at the sound of her name. "Beautiful." She helped Tahoe to his feet, supporting his weight as he swayed dangerously. Her horse snorted nervously at their approach, but Sarah's calm voice settled the animal as she helped Tahoe mount, passing Ayanna up to him before climbing up behind. As they rode through the worsening storm, Sarah felt the man's back rigid against her chest, his body a protective barrier between the world and his child, even in his weakened state. What had brought an Apache man and his infant daughter to collapse? Alone in the desert, miles from any reservation or settlement. The question burned in her mind as her cabin finally came into view, a dim light in the gathering darkness. The cabin's single room glowed with lamplight as Sarah moved between her 2 patients. Tahoe sat rigidly on her only chair, his eyes following her every movement as she tended to Ayanna. The baby lay on Sarah's bed, tiny chest rising and falling with each labored breath. Sarah had managed to get some diluted milk into her, but the infant was severely dehydrated and malnourished. "She needs a doctor," Sarah said, knowing even as she spoke that the nearest physician was at Fort Apache, impossible to reach in this storm. Tahoe seemed to understand her concern, if not her exact words. His hand gently stroked his daughter's dark hair, and he spoke softly in Apache, what sounded like reassurances or perhaps prayers. Sarah busied herself preparing a simple broth, adding extra water to make it easier for Tahoe to swallow. His pride was evident in the way he tried to hide his trembling hands, in how he'd refused her help to sit down despite nearly collapsing. When they'd entered the cabin, she recognized that pride had seen it in her father when illness had taken his strength, but not his dignity. "Here," she offered the bowl, then demonstrated by taking a small sip herself. Tahoe accepted it with a slight nod, drinking slowly while keeping one hand on Ayanna's blanket. The storm rattled the cabin's windows, but inside, an uneasy truce had formed between them. When he finished, Sarah took the bowl and prepared another for herself. She sat on the edge of the bed beside Ayanna, watching the baby's color improve slightly with each drop of milk she managed to take. Tahoe watched them both, his expression unreadable. "Apache?" Sarah asked, pointing to him. Confirmation seemed important, though his appearance made it clear. "White Mountain Apache," he replied in perfect, if accented English. Sarah couldn't hide her surprise, and something like grim amusement flickered across his face. "I learned at mission school, like yours." His words opened a flood of questions in Sarah's mind, but she held them back. There would be time for that, if Ayanna survived the night. Instead, she focused on practical matters. "You should rest," she said, nodding toward her small cot in the corner. "I'll watch Ayanna." Tahoe shook his head firmly. "I stay with daughter." Sarah recognized the immovable object before her. "Then sit here." She patted the edge of the bed. "I'll take the chair. We can both watch her." After a moment's hesitation, Tahoe moved to the bed, his movements stiff with pain or exhaustion. Sarah placed more wood in the stove, bringing the cabin's temperature to something approaching comfortable. She took her shawl and draped it over Tahoe's shoulders without comment, pretending not to notice his momentary stiffening or the way his hand clutched at the fabric when he thought she wasn't looking. Through the night, they maintained their vigil. Tahoe eventually succumbed to exhaustion, slumping against the wall while still seated on the bed, his hand never leaving Ayana's small form. Sarah used the opportunity to dampen a cloth and gently clean the baby's face, to check for any signs of illness beyond the obvious malnutrition. What she found broke her heart. The infant was perfectly formed, with delicate features that mirrored her father's, but so terribly thin that Sarah could count each rib. Yet there was strength there too, in the way tiny fingers curled around Sarah's thumb, in the determined swallows as Sarah fed her more diluted milk. "You're a fighter, aren't you, little one?" Sarah whispered, careful not to wake Tahoe. "Just like your father." Outside, the storm raged on, but in this moment, something shifted. Sarah had helped many children in her years at the mission school, had dried tears and bandaged knees and taught young minds to read and write. But nothing had awakened the maternal ache in her heart, quite like this child, this fragile life, balanced between survival and surrender, needing her in a way no student ever had. As dawn broke, bringing with it the storm's end, Sarah looked up to find Tahoe watching her. His dark eyes held something new, not just suspicion, but evaluation, measuring her worth, her trustworthiness. Sarah met his gaze steadily, still cradling Ayana against her shoulder. "She took more milk during the night," Sarah said softly. "Her breathing is stronger." Tahoe nodded once, relief visible in the slight lowering of his shoulders. "You have good hands for healing," he said, the words carefully chosen. Why? Sarah understood the question beneath the question. Why would a white woman help an Apache man and his child? Why risk her reputation, her safety? "I lost a daughter," she answered simply. "I couldn't save her. Maybe I can help save yours." Understanding passed between them, transcending the vast differences of their worlds. The sun broke through the dusty air outside, sending slanted morning light across the cabin floor. Ayana stirred against Sarah's shoulder, making small sounds of awakening. Tahoe reached for his daughter, and Sarah passed the baby to him without hesitation. He held Ayana with practiced ease, murmuring soft Apache words that needed no translation, a father's love spoke in all languages. "When storm ends," he said, looking toward the window, "we must go." "Go where?" Sarah asked, realizing she had no idea where he had been heading when she found him. Tahoe's expression darkened. "Away, not safe here. You're both too weak to travel," Sarah pointed out. "Stay, at least until Ayana is stronger." She hesitated, then added, "No one comes here. My cabin is far enough from the mission. You would be safe for a few days." Tahoe studied her face, looking for deceit or hidden motives. Finding none, he gave another of his slight nods. 3 days, then we go." Sarah accepted this compromise, knowing it was more than she had expected. 3 days to help this baby gain strength, to learn their story, to figure out how she could help them beyond these cabin walls. 3 days that would change everything she thought she knew about herself, about healing, about finding purpose. In the vast emptiness of loss, the gentle scrape of a spoon against a bowl filled the cabin as Sarah prepared another batch of thin broth. 3 days had passed since she'd found Tahoe and Ayana, and those days had fallen into an unexpected rhythm. By silent agreement, they had divided the small cabin into territories. Sarah took the chair and kitchen area, while Tahoe and Ayana claimed the bed and the eastern corner near the window. "She's stronger today," Sarah observed, watching Ayana grip her father's finger with newfound determination. The baby's hollow cheeks had begun to fill out, her cries growing more insistent, more alive. Each small improvement felt like a victory they shared. Tahoe nodded, the gesture slightly less guarded than it had been on that first night. "Thanks to you." His English, Sarah had discovered, was better than he'd initially let on a protective measure, she guessed, allowing him to assess her intentions while appearing less capable of understanding. Sarah approached with the broth, setting it carefully beside him. "It's time you told me what happened," she said gently. "How you and Ayanna came to be alone in the desert." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. His jaw tightened, and his eyes went to the window, scanning the horizon as he had done compulsively since arriving. Looking for pursuers, Sarah realized, though who they might be remained a mystery. "My wife," he began finally, his voice low but steady. "Kimi. She died giving birth to Ayanna." Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Tahoe continued as if he hadn't heard, though his hand moved to stroke Ayanna's cheek. "On our reservation, there is a new agent. A man who believes Apache children belong in schools far away. Who thinks they must become white to survive." The words struck Sarah with unexpected force. She had heard such sentiments at the mission, had even taught children sent there by well-meaning officials who believed education was the native people's salvation. But she had never considered how it felt for the parents who lost their children to this civilization program. "When Kimi died, the agent came to our home. Said a man alone cannot raise a baby girl. Said Ayanna would be sent away when she reached 5 winters. Tahoe's voice hardened. "I told him no Apache father gives away his child. He said I had no choice." Sarah could picture the scene all too clearly. The government agent with his papers and regulations, the grieving father clutching his newborn daughter, the inevitable collision of worlds with unequal power. "So you ran," she concluded softly. "To my mother's people, in the mountains north, where the agent's papers mean nothing." Tahoe met her eyes directly. "We traveled at night. Stayed hidden, but Ayanna grew sick. I could not hunt with a crying baby. Could not risk fires to keep her warm." The untold suffering behind those simple statements hung in the air between them. Sarah thought of her comfortable classroom, her secure position at the mission, the unquestioned rightness of her presence in this territory. How different the same land looked through Tahoe's eyes, a place of danger, of pursuit, where every white face represented potential betrayal. "The storm caught us," Tahoe finished simply. "The rest you know." Sarah moved to the window, looking out at the landscape that was slowly recovering from the dust storm's fury. The mission lay to the south, Fort Apache beyond it. To the north stretched miles of territory, becoming mountainous and forested as it reached the border with Colorado territory. If Tahoe and Ayanna attempted that journey in their condition, "You can't leave," she said abruptly, turning back. "To face him, not tomorrow. Ayanna is stronger, yes, but she needs at least another week of proper feeding. And you're still too weak to protect her properly." Something flickered in Tahoe's eyes, surprise at her directness, perhaps, or suspicion of her motives. "We cannot stay. The agent will search. Your people will not understand why you help Apache." "My people," Sarah repeated, a hint of bitterness in her tone. "I haven't felt truly part of my people since I buried my daughter." She smoothed her skirt, a gesture that helped her regain composure. "I have a proposal. Stay here for 2 more weeks. I'll bring supplies, medicine for Ayanna. The mission believes I'm visiting a friend in Tucson for the Harvest Festival. No one expects me back for 10 days. And after 2 weeks?" Tahoe challenged. Sarah hesitated, then committed to the half-formed plan taking shape in her mind. "After 2 weeks, I'll help you reach the northern mountains. I know trails the army doesn't patrol. I can get supplies you'll need for the journey." Tahoe's expression remained impassive, but his eyes searched her face with renewed intensity. "Why would you risk this? For strangers?" The question deserved honesty. Sarah moved to her small dresser, opening the top drawer to remove the silver locket she kept there. She returned to Tahoe's side, opening the locket to reveal a tiny lock of dark hair. "My daughter lived for 6 hours," she said quietly. "Long enough for me to hold her, to name her, to memorize every detail of her face. Not long enough for the world to acknowledge she existed at all." She closed the locket, the small click oddly loud in the quiet cabin. "I couldn't save her. But perhaps I can help save Ayanna from losing her father, from losing her people." Tahoe was silent for a long moment. Then, with careful movements, he shifted Ayanna into Sarah's arms. The baby settled against her chest with the easy trust of the very young, unaware of boundaries drawn by adults, by history, by conflict. 2 weeks, Tahoe agreed finally. "Then we go north." The simple agreement sealed a pact between them, a shared purpose that transcended the vast differences of their worlds. Outside, a hawk circled against the clear blue sky, free from the constraints of the earth below. The routine of the following days brought an unexpected peace to Sarah's cabin. While Tahoe regained his strength, Sarah taught at the mission during daylight hours, returning each evening with supplies smuggled in her saddlebags: milk, medicines, extra blankets. She told herself the deception was necessary, justifiable, a higher moral calling than her duty to the mission. Still, each lie to the mission superintendent weighed on her conscience. On the 5th day, she returned to find Tahoe standing in her small garden, Ayanna secured against his chest in a carrier he'd fashioned from one of Sarah's old shawls. The sight stopped her momentarily, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun, his long hair now cleaned and braided, his posture straight and proud once more. "You should not be outside," she admonished, dismounting quickly. "Someone might see you." Tahoe shook his head slightly. "No one comes here. You have no visitors." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact, one that made Sarah acutely aware of how isolated her existence had been before their arrival. "Still, it's safer inside," she insisted, leading her horse to the small lean-to that served as a stable. Tahoe followed, Ayanna making soft cooing sounds against his chest. "She needs sun," he explained. "Air, growing things." He gestured too. The garden with its struggling vegetables and herbs. "I gave her Apache blessing for life. First time outside since birth." The simple ceremony had happened without her, Sarah realized. A sacred moment between father and daughter that belonged to a tradition she could never fully understand. She felt a pang of something like envy, quickly suppressed. "Let me see her," she said instead, reaching for the baby once they were safely inside. Ayanna's improvement was remarkable, her eyes brighter, her movements stronger. When Sarah offered her milk, she drank eagerly, her tiny hands batting at the cup with newfound energy. "She knows you now," Tahoe observed, watching them from his position by the window, always watching. "Recognizes your voice, your hands." Sarah looked up, surprised by the comment and the emotions it stirred. "She's remarkable," she said softly, "so determined to live." "Like her father," Tahoe replied, a rare hint of pride in his voice. "Like her mother." He hesitated, then added, "Kimi was teacher too. At reservation school." This new information shifted something in Sarah's understanding. "You met at the school?" Tahoe nodded, his expression softening with memory. "I brought my brother's children after he died of white man's fever. Kimi taught them English numbers." His hand moved to the silver band he wore on a leather cord. Around his neck a wedding ring, Sarah realized. She saw me. Not just Apache, me. The simple declaration held volumes of meaning. To be seen as an individual, not just a representative of one's race or culture, wasn't that what everyone longed for? Sarah thought of how the mission superintendent spoke of our Apache charges and the native problem, never of individual children with names, dreams, futures of their own. "She sounds remarkable," Sarah said. She was. Tahoe's use of past tense held such finality that Sarah's heart ached for him. For Ayanna, who would never know her mother except through her father's memories. Will you tell Ayanna about her? Sarah asked, settling the now drowsy baby against her shoulder. When she's older? Every day, Tahoe said firmly. Every day until she knows Kimi as well as if she had lived. He moved closer, gently taking his daughter from Sarah's arms. As I will tell her of the white teacher who saved us both when all seemed lost. The words hung between them, an acknowledgement of the bond forming through their shared care of Ayanna. Sarah busied herself preparing their evening meal, unwilling to examine too closely the warmth that spread through her at Tahoe's words. The sight of father and daughter together, at the sense of purpose their presence had awakened in her. Outside, the sun set on another day, bringing them one step closer to the journey ahead and to the inevitable parting that would follow. The sound of hoofbeats approaching the cabin froze them both. Sarah had just finished washing the breakfast dishes while Tahoe sat with Ayanna on the bed, telling her stories in Apache, a morning ritual they'd established over the past week. Now his body tensed like a bowstring, every sense alert to the danger. "Hide," Sarah whispered urgently, gesturing toward the root cellar accessible through a trapdoor beneath the rug. Quickly, Tahoe gathered Ayanna and his few possessions. With practiced speed, disappearing into the small space below. Sarah replaced the rug just as a knock sounded at the door. "Miss Holloway, are you there?" The voice belonged to Reverend Clark, the mission superintendent, the last person Sarah wanted to see. She smoothed her hair, checked the cabin for any signs of her guests, and opened the door with a carefully composed expression. "Reverend Clark, this is unexpected." The Reverend stood on her doorstep, his thin frame rigid with displeasure, his horse tethered nearby. "Indeed it is, Miss Holloway. As unexpected as discovering you never arrived in Tucson for the Harvest Festival." Sarah's mind raced. "I don't understand. I sent word with the mail carrier, who was delayed by the storm and only reached Tucson yesterday." Reverend Clark finished for her. "Mrs. Peterson was most concerned when you failed to appear, having received no message. She sent a telegram to the mission this morning." Sarah's carefully constructed lie collapsed around her. "I can explain. I sincerely hope so." The Reverend's gaze moved past her, surveying the cabin. "May I come in? This conversation is best conducted in private." Sarah had no choice but to step aside, her heart pounding as Reverend Clark entered. His eyes missed nothing, the two bowls drying by the wash basin, the moccasins too large for her feet partially visible beneath the bed, the distinctive smell of the herbal tea Tahoe brewed for Ayanna's stomach. "Miss Holloway," he said finally, turning to face her, "I have always considered you one of our most dedicated teachers. Your work with the children is exemplary, which makes your current situation all the more concerning." "My situation is private, Reverend," Sarah said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Nothing is private when it affects the mission's reputation." His tone hardened. "There are rumors, Miss Holloway. Troubling rumors about a white woman living alone on the outskirts of mission property. About visits from a native man." Sarah felt her face flush with anger. "Is that why you're here? Because of gossip?" "I'm here because of this." He withdrew a paper from his coat pocket. "A notice from the Indian agent at Fort Apache. An Apache man has fled the reservation with his infant daughter. He's considered dangerous, a threat to the child's welfare. All mission personnel are instructed to report any sightings immediately." The paper trembled slightly in Sarah's hand as she read. The description of Tahoe was unmistakable, right down to the silver wedding band he wore. The notice portrayed him as unstable, grief-stricken to the point of endangering his own child. It painted Ayanna as a victim in need of rescue, of proper Christian upbringing away from savage influences. "This is a lie," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I beg your pardon?" She looked up, meeting Reverend Clark's gaze. Directly, This notice, it's a lie. The man described here isn't dangerous. He's a father protecting his daughter from being taken from him. Understanding dawned on the Reverend's face. My God, Sarah, you've hidden them here, haven't you? An Apache fugitive and his child? I found them during the storm, Sarah admitted, seeing no point in further deception. They were dying, Reverend. The baby was severely malnourished. What would you have had me do? Leave them to perish? You should have brought them to the mission, to proper medical care, proper authorities, so the agent could take Ayanna away. Send her to some distant school where she'd forget her father, her language, her heritage. Sarah's voice rose with passion. That's not Christian charity, Reverend. It's cruelty disguised as benevolence. Reverend Clark drew himself up to his full height. You've overstepped your authority, Miss Holloway. Your judgment has been compromised by your personal history. His gaze flickered meaningfully toward the dresser where her daughter's locket lay. I understand your loss was profound, but projecting your maternal longings onto this situation. Don't, Sarah interrupted, her voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare use my daughter's memory to dismiss what I know is right. A tense silence filled the cabin. Finally, Reverend Clark sighed heavily. I have a duty to report this, Sarah. To the mission board, to the proper authorities. The law is clear. And what of God's law? Sarah challenged. What of suffer the little children to come unto me? Does that only apply to white children, Reverend? Or to native children once we've stripped away everything that makes them who they are? The Reverend flinched as if struck. You've changed, Sarah. The mission school may no longer be the right place for you. Perhaps I have changed, she acknowledged. Or perhaps I'm finally seeing clearly what was in front of me all along. Reverend Clark moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. I'll return tomorrow with the Indian agent. For the child's sake, I hope you'll reconsider your position before then. With that final warning, he departed. Sarah stood motionless until the sound of hoofbeats faded into distance. Then she moved swiftly to the rug, pulling it aside to reveal the trapdoor. Tahoe, she called softly. It's safe now. He emerged. From the cellar, Ayanna held protectively against his chest. His expression told her he had heard everything. We must leave, he said immediately. Tonight. Yes, Sarah agreed, already moving to gather supplies. But not alone. I'm coming with you. Tahoe stared at her, clearly shocked by the declaration. You cannot. Your life is here. Your teaching, my teaching position is already lost. Sarah pointed out, her hands steady as she packed food, medicines, extra clothing for Ayanna. And any life I had here ended the moment I chose to help you. She paused, meeting his gaze directly. Unless you don't want my help. It is not about want, Tahoe said carefully. It is about need. Ayanna needs you. He hesitated, then finished simply. I would be grateful for your guidance on the journey north. The admission cost him something, Sarah knew. Pride, perhaps, or the last illusion of self-sufficiency. But there was something else in his eyes as well, respect, trust, the beginning of something that might, with time, grow into more. Then we leave tonight, she decided. I know a trader's route that follows the eastern foothills. It will be slower than the direct path, but safer from pursuit. As dusk fell, they made final preparations. Sarah wrote 2 letters, one to Emily Thompson, including the silver locket with instructions to remember her teacher's stories. Another to Reverend Clark, explaining her actions without apology. She looked around the cabin one last time, at the small space that had been her refuge. And her prison these past 3 years. Are you certain? Tahoe asked quietly, standing in the doorway with Ayanna secured in her carrier. Sarah picked up her packed saddlebags, her decision made. Yes, she said simply. I've never been more certain of anything. Together they stepped into the gathering darkness, three souls united by circumstance, by choice, by the fierce determination to forge a future on their own terms, whatever dangers might lie ahead. The mountain trail narrowed as they climbed higher, forcing them to proceed single file. Sarah led the way, her horse picking a careful path through loose rocks and twisted juniper roots. Behind her, Tahoe rode the sturdy mule they'd purchased from a sympathetic trader 3 days into their journey, a necessary expense when it became clear they couldn't travel fast enough on foot with Ayanna. 5 days had passed since their escape from the cabin. 5 days of constant vigilance, of traveling at dawn and dusk to avoid detection, of camping in hidden ravines and beneath overhanging cliffs. The terrain had changed dramatically as they moved northward. Desert scrubland giving way to pine forest and rocky escarpments as they ascended into mountain country. Ayanna, secured against her father's chest in an improved carrier Sarah had fashioned from her shawl, seemed to thrive despite the difficult journey. Her eyes tracked the shifting patterns of sunlight through pine branches, her tiny hands reaching toward passing butterflies. Each small sign of her growth strengthened Sarah's conviction that they had made the right choice. "We should rest here," Sarah called back, reining in her horse at a small plateau where a spring bubbled from between moss-covered rocks. "The animals need water, and there's good visibility of the trail behind us." Tahoe dismounted with practiced ease, keeping Ayanna secure with one arm while he tied the mule to a nearby tree. In these days of travel, Sarah had watched him grow stronger, more assured, returning to the warrior he must have been before grief and desperate flight had weakened him. The change was evident in the way he moved, in how he scanned their surroundings, with calm alertness rather than panicked vigilance. "No signs of pursuit today," he observed, joining Sarah by the spring. He dipped his hand in the clear water, letting drops fall onto Ayanna's lips, a ritual he performed at every water source, a blessing from his people. "We've covered our tracks well," Sarah replied, though she couldn't entirely suppress the flutter of anxiety that had become her constant companion. Each day without confrontation was a victory, but also brought them closer to their inevitable parting. They had spoken little of what would happen when they reached their destination, the northern Apache settlement where Tahoe's mother's family lived. Sarah had framed her role simply as guide and helper, leaving unspoken the growing attachment she felt toward both father and daughter. Each evening spent teaching Tahoe to prepare milk for Ayanna, each morning waking to the baby's soft coos. Each moment of shared danger on the trail, all had woven a connection between them that defied simple definition. While Tahoe prepared a small smokeless fire to warm Ayanna's milk, Sarah unpacked their meager provisions. The trader who'd sold them the mule had also provided information rumors of Army patrols searching for an Apache man and baby, accompanied by a white woman teacher. The story had spread faster than they could travel. "We are becoming legend," Tahoe had remarked with grim humor when they'd heard. Like old stories of star-crossed lovers from enemy tribes. The comparison had made Sarah blush, though Tahoe had not seemed to notice the implication of his words. Or perhaps, she sometimes thought, catching his gaze lingering on her when he thought she wasn't looking, he had meant exactly what he said. "We should reach the high pass tomorrow," Sarah said now, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "From there, it's 3 days to the settlement, if the trader's map is accurate." Tahoe nodded, testing the temperature of the milk before offering it to Ayanna. "My uncle is elder there. He will welcome us." He paused, then added carefully, "He will welcome you also for what you have done for us." "I've only done what any person of conscience would do," Sarah demurred, though they both knew this wasn't true. Few white women would have abandoned their position, their community, their entire life to help an Apache man escape with his child. "No," Tahoe said firmly. "You have done what only Sarah Holloway would do, what only a mother with empty arms and full heart could understand." The simple truth of his words struck her deeply. Sarah turned away, blinking back unexpected tears. In her years at the mission, she had maintained careful distance from her emotions, from the maternal instincts that had nowhere to go after her daughter's death. Now with Ayanna, with this unlikely journey, those carefully constructed walls were crumbling. "What will you do?" Tahoe asked quietly. "After we reach my people?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Sarah busied herself rolling their blankets, buying time to steady her voice. "I haven't thought that far ahead," she admitted finally. "I can't return to the mission, or any mission. My actions would follow me, make me unwelcome as a teacher." "You could go east," Tahoe suggested, though something in his tone suggested he was testing the idea rather than advocating for it. "Back to your family." Sarah shook her head. "I have no family there anymore. My parents died before I came west." "Thomas," she hesitated, then continued, "the man I was to marry has another life now, another wife." Ayanna finished her milk, and Tahoe lifted her to his shoulder, patting her back with practiced gentleness. The domestic gesture struck Sarah powerfully. This warrior, this man who had faced unimaginable hardship, showing such tenderness to his tiny daughter. "There is another choice," he said finally, his dark eyes meeting hers with unexpected directness. "My people have no school. Children learn from elders, from nature. But there are things they should know of the changing world, reading, numbers." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "They could learn from you." The offer stunned her. "You mean stay with your people?" "With us," Tahoe corrected softly. "With Ayanna, with me." Before Sarah could respond, the distant sound of breaking branches startled them both. Tahoe moved with lightning speed, extinguishing their small fire with dirt while Sarah gathered their belongings. Years of frontier life had taught them both the difference between animal and human sounds, and this was definitely human. "Take Ayanna," Tahoe whispered urgently, transferring the baby to Sarah's arms. "Hide in the rocks above the spring. I will see who comes." "We should stay together," Sarah protested, even as she secured Ayanna against her chest. Tahoe's expression was resolute. "If it is soldiers, they will be less likely to shoot a lone Apache than one traveling with a white woman and baby. Go. Now, if I do not return by sunset, continue north. My uncle will find you if you follow the map." The logic was undeniable, but leaving him felt wrong in ways Sarah couldn't articulate. Tahoe must have read the conflict in her face, for he stepped closer, one hand coming up to touch her cheek in a gesture of surprising intimacy. "Trust me," he said simply, "as I have trusted you with my daughter's life." There was nothing more to say. Sarah gathered Ayanna closer and slipped away through the rocks, climbing to a sheltered position that offered both concealment and a view of the trail below. Tahoe moved in the opposite direction, a shadow among shadows, heading toward the source of the sound. Minutes stretched into an eternity as Sarah waited, every sense alert to danger. Ayanna, perhaps sensing the tension, remained unusually quiet, her dark eyes wide as she stared up at Sarah's face. The baby's complete trust was both comforting and terrifying. This tiny life depended entirely on the decisions they made, the risks they took. The sound of voices drifted up from below, men's voices, speaking English. Sarah strained to hear, catching fragments of conversation. "Tracks lead this way. Reward for information. Apache brave. And white woman. Soldiers, then, or bounty hunters drawn by whatever reward the Indian agent had offered." Sarah pressed herself deeper into the rocky crevice, praying Ayanna wouldn't choose this moment to cry. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see 3 men, on horseback, making their way up the trail, rifles ready. Of Tahoe, there was no sign. The men paused at the spring, dismounting to water their horses. One knelt to examine the ground where their fire had been. "Still warm," he called to the others. "They can't be far." "The Apache's probably watching us right now," another replied, scanning the surrounding forest nervously. "Savages can disappear, like ghosts when they want to." "It's the woman I want to find," the third man said, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone used to being obeyed. "The teacher. She's the one who'll bring a good price." Sarah's blood ran cold. Not soldiers, after all, bounty hunters, operating outside even the questionable law of the territories. Men who would have no compunction about separating Ayanna from her father, about using Sarah herself to claim whatever reward was offered. A flash of movement on the ridge opposite her position caught Sarah's attention. Tahoe moving silently, from tree to tree, circling behind the hunters. She held her breath as he approached, knowing what he intended: to create a diversion, to lead them away from where she hid with Ayanna. It was a brave plan, a sacrificial one, and Sarah couldn't allow it. Making a split-second decision, she shifted Ayanna to a more secure position in her arms. Then, reaching into her pocket, she retrieved the small silver whistle she'd carried since her early days on the frontier. The sharp, piercing sound it made when blown had scattered more than one mountain lion from her path. Now it would serve a different purpose. Sarah took a deep breath, locked eyes with Tahoe across the distance, saw his expression change from determination to alarm as he realized her intention, and blew the whistle with all her strength. The sound shattered the mountain quiet, sending birds flying from nearby trees. The bounty hunters spun toward the source of the noise, rifles raised. Sarah was already moving, darting from her hiding place toward the horses the men had left loosely tethered. "There she is!" one shouted. "The teacher!" A rifle shot cracked through the air, splintering bark near her head. Sarah didn't slow, reaching the horses and slashing one tether with her belt knife before vaulting onto another mount. The animals, already spooked by the whistle and gunfire, needed little encouragement to bolt. "Stop her!" the leader yelled, firing again as Sarah urged the horse up the trail, away from where Tahoe waited, away from Ayanna. She risked one glance back, saw Tahoe emerge from the trees behind the distracted hunters, silent and deadly as he knocked one unconscious with a swift blow. The other two turned, caught between pursuing Sarah and facing this new threat. Then she was around a bend in the trail, the sounds of struggle fading behind her. The stolen horse responded to her urgings, climbing higher into the mountain pass. Sarah had no clear plan beyond drawing the hunters away from Tahoe and Ayanna, giving them time to escape, to reach the safety of his people. Her sacrifice for them, as they would have sacrificed for her. The horse labored up the steep trail, foam flecking its mouth as Sarah pushed it beyond prudence. Behind her, she could hear the pounding of hooves. At least one hunter had followed her. Ahead, the trail narrowed further, skirting a sheer drop on one side. A shot rang out, closer this time. Sarah felt something hot graze her arm, but didn't slow. The pain was distant, unimportant compared to the need to lead the pursuit as far from Tahoe and Ayanna as possible. The trail curved sharply, revealing a massive fallen pine blocking the path ahead. Sarah reined in sharply, the horse rearing in protest. Trapped between the barricade and her pursuer, she made the only choice available. She directed the horse off the trail into the dense underbrush of the forested slope. Branches whipped at her face as the horse plunged downward, more sliding than running on the steep incline. Behind her, she heard shouts of frustration as the hunter reached the fallen tree. Another shot followed her, going wide. The horse stumbled, nearly sending Sarah over its head. She clung desperately to its mane as it regained its footing, continuing its headlong descent. They couldn't maintain this pace on such dangerous terrain. Sooner or later, the horse would fall, taking her with it. As if summoned by the thought, the ground suddenly gave way beneath them. A hidden washout, concealed by pine needles and undergrowth, opened beneath the horse's hooves. Sarah felt the sickening sensation of falling, of the world tilting around her. She threw herself clear as the horse tumbled, landing hard on rocky ground that sloped away beneath her. Unable to stop her momentum, she rolled, branches and stones tearing at her clothing, her skin. The world became a blur of pain and motion, earth and sky trading places with dizzying speed. Then, with stunning abruptness, it stopped. Sarah lay still, the breath knocked from her lungs, her body one massive ache. Above, through the canopy of trees, she could see the late afternoon sky impossibly blue, impossibly distant. She tried to move, gasped as pain shot through her left leg. Not broken, she thought, but badly twisted or sprained. Blood trickled from cuts on her arms, her face. The horse was nowhere to be seen or heard. Either it had continued down the slope or had been quieted by a worse fate than hers. From somewhere above came the sound of voices. The hunters following her trail down the slope. Sarah forced herself to her feet, stumbling as her injured leg threatened to collapse beneath her. She had to keep moving, to draw them further from Tahoe's path. Each step was agony, but she pushed forward, using trees for support as she limped. Deeper into the forest. The voices grew fainter, or perhaps that was just the buzzing in her ears, the gray edges creeping into her vision. She had no idea how far she had gone when her strength finally failed her. Sarah sank to the ground beside a fallen log, her back against its moss-covered surface. The forest was growing dark around her, whether from approaching night or her fading consciousness, she couldn't tell. "I'm sorry, Ayana," she whispered to the empty air. "I'm sorry, Tahoe." She had failed them after all. Failed to guide them safely to their people. Failed to see Ayana grow into the strong young woman she would surely become. Failed to explore the unspoken possibilities that had grown between her and Tahoe on their journey. As darkness claimed her, Sarah's last thought was of Ayana's small hand curled around her finger, trusting, innocent, full of promise. A promise that would now have to be fulfilled without her. The sensation of something cool against her forehead drew Sarah slowly back to consciousness. She opened her eyes to unfamiliar surroundings, a small space enclosed by animal hides, illuminated by the soft glow of a fire burning in a central pit. The air smelled of pine smoke and unfamiliar herbs. "She wakes," a woman's voice set in. Accented English. "Tell the elder." Sarah tried to sit up, gasping as pain lanced through her body. A gentle hand pressed her back down onto what she now recognized as a pallet of soft furs. "Be still," the woman advised, her weathered face coming into focus as she leaned closer. "Your injuries need time to heal." "Where am I?" Sarah managed, her voice a dry rasp. "How did I get here?" Instead of answering, the woman offered a wooden cup filled with cool water. Sarah drank gratefully, each swallow bringing greater clarity to her muddled thoughts. "You are among the people," the woman said finally, taking back the empty cup. "The northern band, Tahoe's mother's family." Memory flooded back, the bounty hunters, her desperate flight, the fall down the mountainside. Tahoe, Ayana. "Are they safe?" the woman assured her. "The child thrives. Tahoe has not left your side since they brought you here, except to tend to his daughter. He will return soon." Relief washed through Sarah, so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. They had made it. Despite everything, they had reached safety. "How long have I been here?" she asked, noticing for the first time that her injuries had been carefully tended, her legs splinted, her cuts cleaned and covered with some kind of salve. "4 days," came a familiar voice from the entrance to the lodge. Tahoe ducked inside, Ayana secured against his chest. His face showed signs of recent hardship, a healing cut above one eye, bruising along his jaw, but his eyes were clear and focused entirely on her. 4 days, Sarah repeated weakly. "I don't remember." "You were very ill," the older woman explained, rising to her feet with fluid grace. "The fever took you after your injuries. I will leave you now." The elder wishes to speak with you when you are ready." With a respectful nod to Tahoe, she departed. Tahoe moved to Sarah's side, settling beside her pallet. Ayanna immediately reached for Sarah, tiny hands grasping the air between them. The familiar gesture brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes. "She has missed you," Tahoe said softly, adjusting his position so the baby could touch Sarah's face. "As have I." "What happened?" Sarah asked. "After I led the hunters away?" Tahoe's expression darkened with memory. "I dealt with the one who remained at the spring. Then I took Ayanna and followed your trail. Found where you went off the path, tracked you through the forest." His hand moved unconsciously to the bruise on his jaw. "Found the hunters, too. They will not trouble us again." The implication was clear, but Sarah couldn't find it in herself to feel anything but relief. "How did you find me?" "I am Apache," Tahoe reminded her with the ghost of a smile. "Finding lost things is what we do." The smile faded. "But I found you too late. The fever had already taken hold. I carried you the last day's journey to my people. Our healer." He gestured toward the entrance where the older woman had departed. "She has cared for you. Said your spirit was strong, that you fought to return." "I heard your voice," Sarah admitted, "in the darkness, calling me back." Tahoe's hand found hers on the furs, their fingers intertwining with natural ease. "I called, and you answered." The simple exchange held depths of meaning neither seemed ready to fully explore. Instead, Tahoe carefully transferred Ayanna to the space beside Sarah on the pallet. The baby immediately snuggled against her, tiny fingers clutching at Sarah's borrowed buckskin dress. "Rest now," Tahoe said, rising reluctantly. "The elder my uncle wishes to speak with you when you are stronger. There is much to discuss about your place here, about our future." "Our future." The words echoed in Sarah's mind as Tahoe departed, leaving her with Ayanna's warm weight against her side. A future she had nearly lost, one she hadn't dared imagine until this moment. A future with this child who needed a mother. With this man who had shown her what courage truly meant. With a people who might, in time, become her own. Outside the lodge, she could hear the sounds of the settlement children playing, women calling to one another, men returning from hunting. Ordinary sounds of life continuing, of a community bound by ties of blood and tradition. A community that might, against all odds, have room for a white woman teacher who had lost everything only to find a greater purpose than she could have imagined. Sarah closed her eyes, one hand resting protectively on Ayanna's small form. For the first time since leaving her cabin, perhaps for the first time since losing her own daughter, she felt the stirring of true hope. Not just for survival, but for joy, for belonging, for love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions. But for now, in this moment of quiet grace, Sarah allowed herself to simply be grateful. For the child breathing softly beside her. For the man who had trusted her with his most precious treasure. For the journey that had led her, against all odds, to this place of beginning again. The scent of pine smoke and sage drifted through the settlement as Sarah stepped carefully. From the lodge, leaning on the walking stick Nahimana, the tribe's healer, had crafted for her. 2 weeks had passed since she'd regained consciousness, and each day brought increased strength to her healing body. The splint on her leg had been removed yesterday, replaced with tight wrappings of leather and herb-infused bandages that supported her injured ankle while allowing her to move more freely. Children playing nearby paused their game to watch her progress, their eyes curious but not unwelcoming. Sarah smiled and raised her hand in greeting, pleased when several of the younger ones waved back enthusiastically. Their initial wariness of the white woman in their midst had gradually transformed into cautious acceptance, aided, no doubt, by Ayanna's obvious attachment to her and Tahoe's clear respect. "Your walking improves," observed Keem, Tahoe's uncle. "And the band's respected elder, as Sarah approached the central fire where he sat with other tribal leaders. "Soon you will outpace even our hunters." Sarah laughed, easing herself onto the offered seat, a flat stone warmed by the morning sun. "I think that day is still far off, Elder, but I'm grateful for every step without pain." Keem nodded, his weathered face solemn, though his eyes held warmth. In the days since her arrival, he had become her strongest advocate among the tribal council, recognizing in Sarah not just the woman who had saved his grandniece, but a potential bridge between two worlds, one that might help his people navigate the increasingly complex reality of white encroachment on native lands. "The council has reached a decision," he announced, gesturing to the other elders seated around the fire. "About your proposal." Sarah's heart quickened. 3 days ago, when her strength had finally returned enough for formal discussion, she had presented her idea to the council, a school for the tribe's children, teaching not just reading and arithmetic, but also practical knowledge of white settlers' ways. Knowledge that might help the younger generation survive in a changing world without abandoning their heritage, their language, their identity. "We will allow this school," Keem stated, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "on 3 conditions." Sarah nodded, waiting respectfully for him to continue. "First, you will teach our ways also, our stories, our history, as told by our elders, not just white man's books." "Of course," Sarah agreed immediately. "I would be honored to learn your stories, to help preserve them." "Second," Keem continued, "you will accept 4 of our women as your assistants, to learn your teaching methods. So if you leave, knowledge remains." The condition revealed their lingering uncertainty about her permanence among them, a fair concern, given the vast differences between her former life and this one. "I accept," Sarah said. "Though I have no plans to leave." Kem's eyes softened slightly at her response. "Plans change with seasons. We prepare for all seasons." He straightened, addressing the final condition. "Third, you will become Ayana's mother in our ways, through ceremony. You will be her guide in white world, as Tahoe is her guide in Apache world." This last condition struck Sarah to her core. To be formally recognized as Ayana's mother, not just caretaker or teacher, was more than she had dared hope for. "Has Tahoe agreed to this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was his request," Keem replied simply. The revelation left Sarah momentarily speechless. Tahoe had been increasingly present during her recovery, bringing Ayana for daily visits, sharing meals, teaching her phrases in Apache. Yet they had not spoken directly of their future together, of what might exist between them beyond their shared love for Ayana. "I am deeply honored," she finally managed, "and I accept all conditions." Keem nodded with satisfaction. "Good. School will begin with next full moon. Adoption ceremony at sunset today." With that pronouncement, the council meeting concluded, the elders rising to attend to other matters of tribal governance. Sarah remained by the fire, processing all that had transpired. A school, a permanent place among these people. A daughter. Possibilities she had thought forever lost to her after the tragedy in Boston. "You look troubled," came Tahoe's voice as he approached, Ayana secure in her carrier on his back. "The council's decision was not favorable?" "No, it was everything I could have hoped for," Sarah hastened to assure him. "I was just overwhelmed." Tahoe settled beside her, carefully removing Ayana from her carrier. The baby, now nearly 6 months old, reached immediately for Sarah, a wide, gummy smile lighting her face. Sarah took her with practiced ease, marveling at how much weight Ayana had gained since their first desperate meeting in the desert. "Keem told me about the adoption ceremony," Sarah said, watching Tahoe's face carefully. "That it was your request." Tahoe met her gaze steadily. "Ayana needs a mother, not just any woman, the one who risked everything to save her, the one who already loves her as her own." He paused, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. Unless you wish to refuse? The council would understand if— No, Sarah interrupted firmly. I want this more than anything. To be Ayana's mother in every way that matters. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I don't want to replace Kimi's memory. Tahoe's expression softened. No one could replace Kimi. She will always be the woman who gave Ayana life, who lives on in her spirit. He reached out, his hand covering Sarah's where it rested on Ayana's back. But a child can have two mothers, one in the spirit world, one in this world. Both necessary, both honored. The simple wisdom of his perspective brought tears to Sarah's eyes. In the white world, relationships were often defined by exclusivity. One wife, one husband, one mother, one father. Here, among Tahoe's people, there seemed to be room for a more expansive understanding of family, of belonging. There is something else, Tahoe continued, his voice taking on a formal quality that told Sarah this was significant. After the adoption ceremony, there is another matter the council wishes to discuss. Concerning us. Us? Sarah repeated, her heart skipping. Tahoe nodded, a rare smile transforming his serious face. I told Kim I wish to ask you to become my wife, in Apache ways. He said the council must approve such a union first between a warrior and a white teacher. The smile turned wry. They have many questions, many concerns. And you? Sarah asked softly. Do you have concerns? Only one, Tahoe replied, his hand still warm over hers. That you might say no. The honesty of his statement took her breath away. In that moment, with Ayana nestled between them and the mountain sun warming their shoulders, the vast differences between their worlds seemed to diminish. What remained was simply this: a man and a woman who had faced death together, who had protected a child together, who had found in each other something worth risking everything for. I would not say no, Sarah whispered. Not to you. Not to us. Tahoe's relief was visible, a tension releasing from his shoulders that she hadn't even realized he carried. Then I will face the council's questions with courage, he said, humor returning to his eyes. Even the difficult ones about whether I can be satisfied with a wife who cannot tan hides properly. Sarah laughed, the sound startling nearby birds into flight. I'm a quick learner, she promised. Though I'll never match Nahimana's skill with herbal medicines. No one matches Nahimana, Tahoe agreed solemnly. Not even other Apaches. Their shared laughter drew curious glances from passing tribal members. This unexpected likeness between the stoic warrior and the serious white teacher, a new development in the settlement's collective observation. As the day progressed toward evening, preparations for the adoption ceremony became the focus of the entire community. Women brought special foods, men prepared the ceremonial fire, children gathered specific flowers and herbs under the direction of the elders. Sarah found herself shepherded to Nahana's lodge, where the healer and 3 other women helped her prepare. You wear this, Nahamana instructed, presenting a beautifully decorated buckskin dress, its yoke adorned with intricate beadwork depicting protective symbols. Made by Kimi's mother before she joined ancestors, for her daughter's wedding day. Sarah hesitated, overwhelmed by the significance. Should this not be saved for Ayana, for her future? Nahimana shook her head firmly. Ayana will have new dress when time comes. This one is for you, connecting you to her mother's family, to her heritage. The older woman's eyes held wisdom accumulated over decades of tribal life. Accepting this dress honors Kimi's sacrifice, continues her love for daughter through you. Put that way, Sarah could only accept with humility. The women helped her change, arranging her hair in the traditional style for important ceremonies, adding subtle touches of earth pigments to her face. When they had finished, Nahimana held up a polished piece of mica that served as a mirror. The reflection startled Sarah not because she looked Apache, she did not, but because she recognized in her transformed appearance a visible symbol of her inner journey. The woman who had left the mission school seemed a lifetime removed from the one who now prepared to formally join an Apache family. "You look ready," Nahimana approved. "Not just outside, inside too." As sunset approached, Sarah was led to the ceremonial grounds, a natural amphitheater, formed by surrounding rock formations that amplified sound and created sacred space. The entire tribe had gathered, forming a circle around the central fire where Kim and other spiritual leaders waited. Tahoe stood opposite the fire, dressed in ceremonial attire that emphasized his status as a warrior, as a father. In his arms, Ayana wore a tiny dress that matched Sarah's in design, the continuity between generations made visible through pattern and color. The ceremony began with prayers in Apache, the language flowing around Sarah like water, still largely incomprehensible to her, yet somehow deeply familiar after weeks among the people. Kim gestured for her to step forward, to join Tahoe and Ayana at the fire's edge. "Today we witness a rare thing," Kim announced, speaking in English out of respect for Sarah. "A new mother born not of blood, but of courage. Not of flesh, but of spirit." He took Ayana from Tahoe's arms, holding her up for the community to see. This child, daughter of Tahoe and Kimi, now also becomes daughter of Sarah, the teacher, who walked between worlds to save her. A murmur of approval rose from the gathered tribe. Sarah felt tears threatening again, this public acknowledgement of her place in Ayana's life overwhelming in its solemnity, its acceptance. Sarah Holloway. Kim continued, "Do you accept this child as your daughter? Do you promise to teach her your wisdom, to protect her with your life, to honor her Apache heritage, while helping her understand the changing world beyond our mountains?" "I do," Sarah answered clearly, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "With all my heart." Kim turned to Tahoe. "And you, Tahoe, son of Heliku, do you accept this woman as mother to your daughter? Do you promise to honor her wisdom, to protect her place among our people, to walk beside her in raising this child?" "I do," Tahoe responded, his deep voice resonating with conviction. "Until I join the ancestors." Kim nodded, satisfied. He lowered Ayana into Sarah's waiting arms, then used a ceremonial brush to paint matching symbols on both their foreheads, connecting them visibly as mother and daughter. "What exists in spirit is now recognized by the people," Kim declared. "Ayana has two mothers, one watching from the spirit world, one holding her in this world, both necessary, both honored." A cheer went up from the gathered tribe, a celebration of new beginnings, of hope continuing despite loss. Women came forward with gifts for the new mother and child. Men offered Tahoe ceremonial tokens, acknowledging his family's expansion. Children scattered flower petals around the three of them, creating a circle of blessing that reflected the larger community's embrace. As night fell fully, the celebration continued with feasting, with stories, with songs that had been passed down through countless generations. Sarah sat with Ayana, sleeping peacefully in her arms, watching as Tahoe participated in a traditional dance with other warriors, his movements powerful, graceful, speaking of a heritage she was only beginning to understand. "He dances for you," Nahimana commented, settling beside Sarah. "Shows his strength, his worthiness as husband." Sarah felt warmth rise to her cheeks. "The council has not yet approved." Nahimana made a dismissive sound. "Council approved before sunset. Just needed. Ceremony first." She gestured toward where Kim sat with other elders, their expressions reflecting satisfaction with the day's events. "They see what is already true, you belong to each other. All that remains is to say words, make it known to all." The matter of fact acceptance of what had developed between Sarah and Tahoe, relationship that would have scandalized white society, reminded Sarah again of the different values that governed Apache life. Practical considerations mattered more than abstract prejudices. A good mother for a motherless child. A strong partnership between two people who respected each other. These were valuable regardless of the color of one's skin. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From the privileged drawing rooms of Boston to a mission school on the frontier to this mountain settlement, each step seemingly random, yet forming a path that had led her exactly where she needed to be. The grief that had driven her west, that had isolated her in that small cabin, had not disappeared. She would always carry the memory of her lost daughter, would always honor that brief life. But now that grief had transformed into something new, a capacity for deeper love, for greater courage, for seeing beyond the artificial boundaries that separated people from one another. Tahoe approached as the dancing ended, his expression softening as he saw Ayanna sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms. He settled beside them, his presence solid and reassuring. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we will speak the marriage words, if you still wish it." "I do," Sarah replied, the formal response feeling right for this moment of commitment. Though I know little of being an Apache wife, Tahoe's smile was rare and therefore precious. And I know little of being husband to a white teacher. We will learn together. He touched Ayanna's cheek gently. For her, for ourselves. Sarah leaned slightly against his shoulder, this small public gesture of affection all that was needed between them. "I never imagined this future," she admitted. "When I found you in the desert, I thought only of saving Ayanna. I didn't know I was also saving myself." "That is the way of the Great Spirit," Tahoe responded. "One act of courage opens path to many blessings. One moment of kindness ripples outward like stone thrown in still water." He looked around at the community that had welcomed Sarah, at the daughter they now shared. "You saved 3 lives in the desert that day, Ayanna's mine. And your own." The profound truth of his statement settled into Sarah's heart. She had indeed been dying in her own way before finding Tahoe and Ayanna, not physically, but spiritually. Walled off from love, from connection, from purpose. The risk she had taken in helping them had broken down those walls, allowing life to flow back into places long abandoned to grief. As the night deepened and stars appeared in brilliant profusion above the mountains, Sarah felt a sense of peace unlike any she had known since childhood. Here, in this unexpected place with these unexpected people, she had found home. Not the home she had been taught to want or expect, but the home her soul had been searching for, one built on courage, on compassion, on the radical act of seeing beyond difference to the humanity that united them all. Ayanna stirred in her arms, dark eyes opening to gaze up at Sarah with complete trust. This was her daughter now, not by birth, but by choice, by love, by the shared journey that had forged bonds stronger than blood. Tomorrow, Tahoe would become her husband in the eyes of the tribe, formalizing what her heart already knew to be true. "They said that baby would die without a mother," Sarah whispered, remembering the Indian agent's cruel assessment. "They were wrong about so many things." Tahoe nodded, his arm coming around her shoulders as they watched the ceremonial fire burn down to embers. "The baby lives because she has a mother, one who found her way across mountains, across worlds, to exactly where she was meant to be." Sarah smiled, feeling Ayanna's steady heartbeat against her own. The journey had been long, dangerous, filled with losses that had seemed unbearable at the time. Yet here, in this moment of belonging, she could see how each step, even the painful ones, had been necessary to bring her home. As the celebration wound down and families began returning to their lodges, Sarah looked up at the vast canopy of stars overhead. Somewhere among them, she believed, her first daughter watched over her. Somewhere, Kimi smiled to see her child safe in loving arms. The boundaries between worlds, like those between peoples, were perhaps thinner, more permeable than she had been taught. In the morning, she would begin her new life officially, as Ayanna's mother, as Tahoe's wife, as a teacher bridging worlds that desperately needed to understand each other. The path ahead would not be easy, but she would walk it. With courage, with purpose, with the love that had brought her through darkness into this unexpected light. Tahoe helped her to her feet, Ayanna still sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. Together, they walked toward the lodge that would now be their family home, 3 souls united by choice rather than chance, by love rather than obligation. Behind them, the last embers of the ceremonial fire glowed like earthbound stars, marking the sacred ground where one journey had ended and another had begun. In the years that followed, the legend of the white teacher and the Apache brave would spread throughout the territories, a story of courage, of defiance against unjust laws, of love that transcended the artificial boundaries of race and culture. Their school would become a model for a new kind of education, one that honored native wisdom while preparing children for a changing world. Their family would expand to include 2 more children brothers for Ayanna, bridges between cultures. In their very existence. And on quiet evenings, beside their own fire, Sarah would tell their children the true story, not the legend, but the reality of how fear can be overcome by courage, how hatred can be answered with compassion, how even the deepest wounds can heal when touched by love, how sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most beautiful destinations, how family is not just what we are born into, but what we choose to create together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.